What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Off the Top Rope here on the Off the Mic Sports Network. So I've talked about problematic people. Um, I'm going to kind of keep it going here. We talked about Matt Riddle here on the channel recently, and I want to talk about Ronda Rousey here for a second because it seems like ex MMA people and former you know former former UFC people turned professional wrestlers are now in the news this week with some of the things that they've said. Matt Riddle, by the way, seemingly the deposit has been returned. He's still a piece of shit. I mean, I still think he's a dumbass. He needs to shut his mouth. Ronda Rousey is this is interesting because you guys know the whole story. 2018, she shows up in WWE, has maybe one of the best debuts at WrestleMania in her match with Stephanie McMahon and Triple H. Wins the women's championship at SummerSlam. Really good rise. Ultimately leads the women into the first ever female main event of WrestleMania at WrestleMania 35 in 2019. And then she disappeared for 3 years. She disappeared for 3 years until the Royal Rumble in 2022, went out, had a baby, and her second run was not nearly as good as the first. You could tell that she was disinterested. Seemingly, there was a lot of stuff that came out that she was not happy about some of her decision making, and then ultimately drops the title to Charlotte Flair unceremoniously on an episode of SmackDown to close 2022. She ultimately wins the women's tag team titles with Shayna Baszler. Really underwhelming feud to put over her friend Shayna Baszler. Obviously not with the company anymore as a wrestler. I think she's been trying out for producer slots and whatnot. I don't know what the whole deal is with Shayna Baszler. But Ronda seemingly, has, opened her mouth and said some things that are really interesting. So the first thing was apparently, and this has, I think, been reported, that she was not necessarily thrilled that the initial plan, and this is why maybe the finish to the Mania 35 main event was so botched, is Ronda didn't want to tap out to disarm her from Becky Lynch. She didn't want to have to submit. On some level, I can understand that, but when it comes to putting people over, you've got to have something selfless within yourself to understand that Becky Lynch in 2019 was the biggest thing in professional wrestling, male or female. She was. Like Becky Lynch was just as much responsible as Ronda Rousey for the women being in the main event of WrestleMania 35. Let's just call it what it is. Ronda Rousey, obviously, in her notoriety and her her stature in the UFC, being what she was in the UFC, of course, like Ronda Rousey obviously did help, but she wasn't the only reason why the women were there. Like Charlotte Flair didn't need to be in that match to begin with, but that's a separate issue. Becky Lynch became the man, and it was a big reason why she elevated herself to that point. So that was the first thing. But then this quote really caught my eye, and so much so because, and the reason why I saw this, MJF, of all people, basically said, yeah, wrestling's a business. So let me read you guys this quote. The Lapsed Fan podcast was what she was on. She said, quote, "The fact that they had me fighting Alexa Bliss at all was fucking ridiculous. And you want to know why they had me against Alexa Bliss? Because she had the most merch sales at the time. Like, what the fuck? That's your decision-making process?" This just shows you everything and reveals everything that you need to know about Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey was never in this for growing women's wrestling. She was never in this to elevate the brand. Like, yeah, on some level, she could say what she wants, but look at the book on her and what happened in the UFC. Look what happened there. The minute that she faced any form of adversity, she disappeared and ran away from it. Holly Holm humiliated her. Amanda Nunes embarrassed her, and she retired. She quit. So the minute, and you saw what happened. She was pissed. You guys remember Survivor Series in 2018 when Becky Lynch and her were going to feud with each other, and then there's the DQ finish with Charlotte Flair. They were cheering Charlotte Flair because they wanted to see Ronda get her ass kicked in LA. And Ronda was not pleased with that. That's part of the way the wrestling business works. They're going to cheer and boo for whoever the fuck they want. And if you don't like it, you've got to deal with it. You've got to have thick skin. And Ronda didn't. And then also basically saying, yeah, you know what? I'm not tapping out. And trying to make it about her mother. I was like, what are we doing? But this whole thing with Alexa Bliss going back to 2018, Alexa Bliss, for all of, the negativity that she had gotten, early on in her time in WWE, and I know a lot of people listen to the reaction that she got at this year's Royal Rumble. She's one of the most popular women in that division. That woman has busted her ass from being a fitness model to in a cheerleader gimmick to being one of the most popular and most versatile characters and professional wrestlers that they have in the women's division. She was popular. Yeah, she's hot. Yeah, she's gorgeous. Like, I get it. And she's parlayed a lot of what she has been able to do in her career, um, not just to what she's looked, but she deserved to be in that spot. So for Ronda to basically be like, yeah, they're basing it off of merch sales. Ronda, you got a women's championship match and you won the women's championship. What the fuck are you complaining about? The fuck are you complaining about? You you got the women's championship, you got the run, you got a main event of WrestleMania, and then you lost. Then you went home, had a kid for a while, and you were gone for a while. You come back in 2022. Your second run wasn't nearly as good as the first. You seemed checked out. You seemed lackadaisical throughout it. And, what's next? Is she going to complain about Liv Morgan? Yeah, I didn't like how Liv Morgan was, like, more so, like, it wasn't about how Ronda Rousey was portrayed in that feud. If you guys remember in 2022, the SummerSlam match, it was more how they portrayed Liv Morgan, like, and made her look kind of weak throughout that title run. And it really wasn't until last year where we saw what Liv Morgan can be. But this thing with, like, what is this with ex MMA people who have broken into the WWE world just seemingly being bitter and, ungrateful? And, like, Ronda Rousey just seems like one of the most ungrateful, miserable human beings to ever be an athlete. Like, she thinks that she's owed everything. I get it. She had a really good rise of popularity in the world of UFC and was famous for all her abrupt knockouts. And she became, very popular. But then that came crumbling down really quick when she took a loss to Holly Holm, and then ultimately Amanda Nunes absolutely beat the living shit out of her and effectively retired her. And we haven't heard from her in UFC ever again. She goes to WWE. It's all roses. It's beautiful and everything for about a year. And then she gets done at that WrestleMania match at WrestleMania 35, and we didn't see her for basically 3 years. And basically, she has been complaining ever since she left WWE, like, about how things didn't go her way. And complaining about Alexa Bliss, that you had to face Alexa Bliss. Dude, you won the championship. What are you complaining about? Alexa Bliss is popular. Cool. This is a business. MJF, of all people, said, hey, like, MJF, of all people, is talking about, yeah, funny. Wrestling is an entertainment business, and it's driven off of, popularity. And Alexa Bliss is a popular performer. What's the problem here? I don't get why these out, because here's the thing. Let me do this for a second. I can't believe I'm actually going to defend Logan Paul here for a second. Logan Paul is an outsider. He's absolutely an outsider. But you can see that no matter how obnoxious he is outside of the ring, you see whenever that guy shows up in a ring, he does everything he can to, at least try and wow us. Sometimes people say he steals people. That guy has gone in there almost every single time that he has been put in a professional wrestling ring over the last, 3-4 years. And he has continuously blown our minds with his athleticism and his ability to get the little things in professional wrestling. And you don't hear him complaining about anything. Like, yeah, he's obnoxious and he's a little piece of shit and he's deplorable outside of the ring. But in terms of the context of wrestling, he hasn't complained about any of that shit. Ronda Rousey, all she's done since she left WWE is complained and acted like she didn't get everything that she wanted. She did. And it didn't work. It didn't go her way. So what did she do? She did what she always does. She quit. Everybody who says that, she's a big reason why women's wrestling is where it's at, yeah, she helped. But please, I'm done hearing about this. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.